We are live on Facebook as well. There's the reverb. What's up, IG? How you guys doing? Hopefully you guys get some questions for us today. All
Yeah,
right.
what's going on?
What up? What up? What up? Welcome everybody that is watching live on Facebook and YouTube. I'm your host Joel Hartman from Prospect Dugout. I'm joined by a very special guest. He's special every single Tuesday right here on the Prospect Dugout Network. His name is Xavier Scruggs. Xavier, how's it going, buddy? What you up
Hey,
to?
it's going good, man. Just hanging out today. Been continuing to work out. We talked about this last
Yep.
week. Continuing to work out, stay ready, stay in shape. Listening to everything going on with Major League Baseball now. Looks like they're getting something going now, so that's good for free agents like me.
Yep.
And man, just continuing to keep working, working on extraordinary athletes, trying to help these kids with extraordinary athletes virtual, because a lot of these kids they don't have an opportunity to play yet. Some of them are starting to transition into playing, and then
Mhm.
some of them don't have that opportunity yet. So I'm providing the opportunity for them to Zoom with me, get on calls with me,
That's
and
awesome.
just talk about stuff like we talked about today. Just a little mentorship.
That's what's up, man. So each week we have this special show that we call the X Factor with Xavier Scruggs, and we just dive deep into the mental side of the game of baseball. Um, this week we're talking about dealing with failure and confidence. We're going to get into that in a minute, but before we do get started, if you're watching live on Instagram, if you're watching live on Facebook, or if you're watching live on YouTube, go ahead and drop a comment if you got any questions about confidence, if you got any questions about dealing with failure. But we're gonna jump right into it. Oh, one more thing, head over to your app store and download the Prospect Dugout app. Just want to throw that in there. But Xavier, we're gonna jump right into it. Right, we're gonna jump right into today. We're gonna talk about part one, or topic number one, dealing with failure. So why don't you just kind of give me an overview of your thought process when it comes to that? And I got a few questions that I want to ask you as you dive into that. Hold on, X. I think your microphone is messed up. Play around with your cord because I can barely hear you. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I was just saying, when we're talking about dealing with failure. We're talking about different avenues, right? As an athlete, there's so many ways that we can fail, and there's so many ways that we can succeed. So we have to first and foremost know our own standards of those things. And we talked a little bit about this last week, is not having the same standards as everybody else because every athlete is different.
Hmm.
So like for a sport like baseball, we understand as a hitter, we're going to fail more times than not. We're going to get out more times than not. And I don't even like to say that word fail, because just because we got out doesn't mean we failed a lot of the times, right?
Right.
So first and foremost, I want us to understand our own standards of success and failure. Understanding that not every mistake, not every mishap, not every error doesn't mean that that's a failing point.
Hmm.
That's a lot of times, and you'll hear a lot of people, successful people, talk about a lot of times those are learning points. So for me, it's important for the athlete to switch their mindset into thinking about, when I fail or when I don't succeed, what is the learning point? So that's what, for me, that's the basis, the foundation of kind of dealing with certain failures that we go through, starts from. I feel like it's so important for athletes and parents of athletes to understand that nobody's going to be perfect. And
Hmm.
talking to a lot of these athletes today, it's hard for me to believe, like, a lot of these kids, a lot of these young athletes, they just expect just perfection, and that's not going to happen. So you have to
Right.
understand that you're not going to be perfect. You have to understand that it's okay to strive for perfection, with realizing that you're not going to be perfect. So
Right.
that's where I like to set the foundation, and allow these athletes, parents of athletes, to understand that there's certain avenues and certain things to navigate when we talk about failure first and foremost.
All right. So that leads me to my first question. You kind of hit on it right there, but how do we accept failure as a normal part of the game, and not something that's out of the ordinary? Because I mean, if you think about it, you go 3 for 10, you're considered good. So like how do we get the mindset as a player? How do we get the mindset as a parent that's watching that it's not that we're saying failure is good, but like just like what you were saying, it's not even necessarily failure. It's just part of the game. So how do we accept going 3 for 10 as normal and not really something that it should be unexpected?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we have to understand what's normal for us. Like every player is going to be different. Like if I'm Johnny and I'm not playing much and I'm coming off the bench and I'm coming to hit, I maybe only have one at bat, you know, that's different than somebody that's starting a
Right.
game and that's getting four different at bats. Because one person with four at bats, they're going to feel like, okay, I need at least two or three hits. Johnny off the bench, you know, it may be more important for him to work a good at bat to help his team. He may not get on base, but maybe he sees 13, 14 pitches in the at bat. That's succeeding for him. So you have to understand that there's going to be different levels, different standards for every single player. If I'm a freshman, you're going to have different expectations as a senior if you're both on the varsity team, right? So first and foremost, as a player, I have to set the standards for myself. And that starts with something that we mentioned a little bit ago is like goal setting. So I know if I have certain goals for the day or for the week or for the whole year, that's what I'm striving towards. And that's what I understand my success and failures off of. And those failures, when we talked about a little bit earlier, those are learning points from my goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I didn't reach every goal or the goal that I expected to reach during the game, say I was, I'm a second baseman and I want to make every play, right? We can't be perfect, but if I'm striving to be perfect, that's okay. I make one error. Then I understand, okay, if my goal was to make every play and I made an error, now it's how do I learn from that? How do I learn from that small failure? Don't blow it up and oh man, I cost my team. No, how do I get better and learn the next time? So there's three things that come off of that. Was there what are the questions that I want to ask myself? Why wasn't it my day necessarily? Why didn't I make that play? How can I get better? Who's going to help me? So
Mm-hmm.
I have to understand that there's going to be people when I'm going through little weaknesses or going through failures or struggles, there's always going to be people that are going to be there. My coaches, I have to lean on them. My teammates, hey, did you
Mm-hmm.
see something that I did at the plate that, maybe I didn't feel it? So when you have those failures, have a checklist for yourself. And I think also checkpoints also are mental. Was there anxiousness? Was there frustration? Was I
Mm-hmm.
distracted? So those are all things that we can check on after we have those little hiccups or whatever. But in a game like baseball, and go back and really answer your question, like base your own successes and failures off of your own standards, off
Mm-hmm.
your own goals. Like these are off your own preparation. Like these are things you set from the beginning. Like if you don't have goals or a preparation or a routine, like then you're going to feel like you failed, you know, in a huge proportion when you really didn't.
Right.
So I think you have to set the standard for yourself. Parents, help your kids to set the standards as well. If your kid doesn't quite understand, hey, he's this type of level player. Let's sit him down. Let's write down some of these things that we want to accomplish during the games, during
Mm-hmm.
preparation, during our pregame warm up, whatever it may be. So you start understanding his own standards, his own goals, and then he can build off of that.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you say? What do you say to a kid that he's working out with a buddy, or he's paying attention to the guys that he's working out with on his team at practice, and he sees the things that he's struggling with, and then he sees the things that they're struggling with, and they don't match up. So it's like he's comparing himself. He's comparing his failure to the failure. Well, they're going 3 for 4 and 2 for 5. I'm over here 1 for 3, 1 for 4. And it's like, well, and you were kind of just hitting on this a little bit, but like, just because you go 1 for 4, like, okay, what were your other three at bats? Were they 3 strikeouts, or did you ground out 3 times to the second baseman to move the runner from second to third with nobody outs? Now you give your guy behind you a
Right.
chance. So it's like you got to be careful. But like, what do you say to that guy that is obviously seeing those differences and comparing his failures to others?
Yeah, yeah. First and foremost, I think that we have to understand that naturally as human beings, we're going to compare ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But the best human beings, the best, most successful ones, kind of put their head down and figure out the things that they have to get better at instead of worrying about something that they can't control. So for me, it's easy to look at my teammate and say, man, my teammate killed it today, but I really struggled.
Mm-hmm.
Man, for some reason I couldn't hit, but off that same picture, my teammate was killing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, excuse me, that's going to be normal a lot of the times. But the easier it is, or the more that we work on sticking to our plan, sticking
Mm-hmm.
to what makes us good and bettering our weaknesses instead of like worrying about what somebody else is doing, even the other team. Like a lot of times, you can't control what the other team is doing. You have to be focused on yourself. Same thing in the weight room. Sometimes you're not going to put up the same weight as somebody else,
Man, and that's a tough one too in the weight room because you feel like, oh, he's lifting this, and I mean, even if it's a 25-pound difference, you're like, but that's the thing, like not everybody's a home run hitter. Not everybody's going to
Right?
hit the ball out of the ballpark, right? And not
That's a
everybody's going to
good
be able to
point.
bench 225. Not everybody is going to be able to squat, 355, whatever it may be. Just because you may feel like, ooh, I should be able to do that or I can do that, doesn't necessarily mean you can. But that becomes irrelevant because when you make that decision to do, put that extra weight on there and you're not ready and you don't have the right form, and then all of a sudden it's messing up your lower back, and now all of a sudden you can't perform well, I got to take a day off from hitting. You got to be
Yeah.
careful when it comes to that stuff.
And that's a really good point. And I wrote down because you brought another point to me. It's like everybody's tools are different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I have different tools than you, I know that you're going to do better at certain things than I am. Especially if I'm a left-handed hitter and I'm facing a lefty,
Mm-hmm.
I may be struggling a little bit harder that day than you might be if you're a right-handed hitter, but mentally I have to prepare myself to do what I need to do. I can't worry about you. We're a
Right.
team, obviously, but for me to be successful, I have to worry about me versus that pitcher. Or if
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the field, me versus that fly ball or that ground ball. Or if I'm a pitcher, me and that hitter.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that kind of something we touched upon last week too is like, where's your focus?
Right.
When we're talking about failure and success, our focus is so important. And I kind of talked about this with extraordinary athletes virtual. Is like, if we got a lot of kids that play Call of Duty today,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of sniping, a lot of sharpshooters. Like, our focus has to be so locked into one thing that we can't get distracted by those things. So I think it's important to remember that there's going to be noise, there's going to be distractions and stuff, but the better we are at blocking that stuff out, the more we can focus on our task at hand, and the more we understand, okay, this is what I'm struggling at. Let me continue to work on that. Kind of like that checklist I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, understanding that before we think about mechanical things, let's think about mental. What could have went wrong?
Yeah, for sure.
I was 1 for 10 during a tournament or a couple of days that weekend. I was one for
Mm-hmm.
10. Maybe I hit 8-line drive. Somebody
Yeah.
mentioned that earlier in the chat here. We got Looney's 23. He said, if I line drive out maybe 8 out of 10, we have to understand that, the stats aren't going to show that.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't mean that's failure. So I want kids to understand that. I want, a lot of times the parents can see that if Johnny hit 8 bullets out of 10, like, that's legit, but the kid is going to see his average 100 over the weekend, so that's the thing, is like, it's hard for us to remember to take the numbers out of it a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think that's a tough thing for travel ball nowadays, especially for the younger generation, is that they're so wrapped up on winning. They're so wrapped up on being 2-0 in pool play, so that way they can get the better time on Sunday for bracket play. But I think that's something that the parents get lulled into as well, is that they see another kid doing well and they want to get on their kid for not doing as well as the other kid. But they got to realize that everybody, like we just talked about, everybody's different, right? Them going 3 for 4 doesn't mean you're going to go 3 for 4, because if you think that just because someone goes 3 for 4, you should go 3 for 4, you haven't spent a second in the game of baseball. So you need to stop coaching. You need to stop instructing and
That's
stop
true,
and
man.
stop painting a mental image that is false. It's like you never seeing a a certain tree in person, and then you telling me or me telling you to go draw it, and you got to try to figure out how to do it. You don't even know. People have told you about it, but you don't know exactly the intricacies and what it's all about. So I think that's one of
And
the things.
no, no, not to cut you off. That's a perfect point. But I just wanted to also mention another thing is like in today's game now, like a lot of the numbers are totally different now. So
Mhm.
like average isn't as important because now we have the ability to recognize when somebody's hitting the ball 90 to 100 miles an hour off the bat. And that's going to play over a long period of time, right? So I could have a weekend of me putting balls in play hard, but ended up going 1 for 12 or two for 13, whatever it may be. But at the same time, I'm hitting balls 90 miles an hour, 95
Yeah.
miles an hour off the bat. People are recognizing that. They see those numbers
Hmm.
because the average doesn't matter as much today as it used to. So I have to understand how I'm being evaluated too. That plays alongside of my success and my failures and my goals.
Right.
Um, like the Swish experience that we're going to have, they're going to be able to see their numbers at the showcase, how hard they're throwing, you maybe spin rate, all that stuff. Like spin rate now is a lot more important sometimes than, whether or not you get hit hard, because they understand that it's going to play during a long period of time or during an extended period of time. So I want kids and parents to understand that they're being evaluated totally different now too.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to wrap up that point, I just think it's, you know, you you don't know you don't know how hard the game is if you're really focusing on those 3 for 4 numbers, those 2 for 4, whatever. So I just think that we have to be a little bit more aware of how difficult that the game is. So just to wrap up, we're here on the X Factor with Xavier Scruggs. I'm your host Joel Hartman from Prospect Dugout, and we're talking about dealing with failure. And as we wrap up this topic and move on to the second topic, Xavier, how do we learn from failure?
Yeah, I think, man, that's a great question because learning from failure is the ultimate thing we have to do. We can't allow failure to happen and keep letting it happen over and over and over again. Um, we talk about this game of adjustments. Um, and that's ultimately the biggest thing that we have to do as athletes, as baseball players. We have to make adjustments. So, kind of what I talked about earlier is recognizing and learning from the feedback, right? So, first, mental checklist during my at bat, during the pitch, during the ground ball, during the fly ball. Did I feel any pressure? Did I feel any anxiety? Was my heart beating fast? Understanding why those things happen first. Was I not prepared? Was I ready? Was I distracted? So if those things are happening, write down, okay, this is how I felt. This is how I'm going to fix it. This is how I get over distraction. I'm not going to talk to my buddy. I talk to a bunch of kids that are like, they love to talk on the field. I'm like, that's okay, but don't become distracted because of that. So if I'm a shortstop, I'm talking to second baseman, all of a sudden the ball's getting hit, boom, and I'm not ready. Like that's another way of not being prepared. So understanding, okay, maybe I need to start talking a little bit less, maybe focus in a little bit more. Maybe my preparation needs to be a little bit better. And how do I do that? Whatever I felt weak at or whatever I struggled at that day, man, I'm big on writing it down, understanding, okay, this is how I felt. This is how I can practice on it the next day. If I felt like I was getting some balls on the outer half as a hitter and I wasn't able to drive them to right center or drive them to right field, and I kept trying to pull off of it, okay, I understand what I did. A big part of being a great player is understanding what you did wrong and accepting that, and then taking that into the cage. Okay, let me get off this tee and hit 100 balls middle away and drive them with backspin to the right side or drive them to the right center gap. So understanding what you did wrong and then having a plan to do it right the next time. The plan is the preparation, the commitment. That's the stuff that we can do. That's the easy part we can do, because when the game comes, that's when things start speeding up. So we have to make sure we handle it when things are a little bit slower.
For sure. So I really think that, just to tie into that, keeping a journal and writing things down is important because you can get into the same situation. And like we talked about last week in preparation, like we want to get ourselves to a place where we feel comfortable. So if we're like when we talked about with routine, like that's why we do the things that we do, because it puts us into a comfort level. So if we're failing, if we're doing things that you know we realize aren't the best that we can do, if we're writing those down, we can learn from that because we can use that information in our training and in our improvement for later on down the road. So that was topic number one, dealing with failure. I mean, it's an everyday topic when it comes to the game of baseball, but also, in life, and especially with the way the world is today, a lot of things don't always turn out the way that you want them to. So we're live here on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I'm your host, Joel Hartman, here on Prospect Dugout, joined by what an awesome guy. He's got xoathletes.com. Why don't you mention a little bit about what that is all about? X.
Yeah. XOathletes.com is just about providing an opportunity for players, athletes to get together and learn in an environment that is very laid back. And it's about mental strength training, just strengthening your mental performance, whether that be by a workshop, whether that be by motivational speaking, whether that be by virtual. Right now, obviously, is a time when I'm doing a lot of virtual stuff.
Yep.
So just helping these athletes is huge. What I ultimately love to do is put on camps and events. I just recently did one in San Diego not too long ago, hopefully doing one here in Tampa soon. And then we'll be a part of a actual performance, an athletic performance building here in South Tampa coming here toward the end of the year. So ultimately, just want to provide an environment for athletes to understand those life skills, like dealing with failure, confidence, learning how to make commitments, discipline, self-discipline, motivation. All those things are so important. And we're expected as athletes to know those things a lot of the times, but we can't know them without really being taught the
Yeah.
right way.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, you mentioned some events you have come up. We actually have one coming up next week down here in Bradenton, Florida, that Xavier is going to be a part of. It's called the Swish Baseball Experience. You got a huge lineup of former MLB players: Tino Martinez, Gary Sheffield, Miguel Cairo, just to name a couple. Nick Swisher is going to be there. My man Xavier Scruggs is going to have a little time where he's going to chat with the players, talk a little bit about the mental side. It's going to be a good day. It's going to be a fun-filled day of baseball. We're going to have nice little catered lunch coming in, a little Q&A session. I can't wait, man. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun.
Oh
So
man, I'm juiced. I'm juiced. So many good people, good opportunity for these kids.
that's it. That's it. So all right. So we're gonna move on to topic number two. We're here on the X Factor with Xavier Scruggs. Played 3 years in the big leagues. Current free agent, staying in shape. Played over in Korea. Played a bunch of minor league ball all over the place. We talked about for about 30 minutes. We talked about dealing with failure, how to accept failure as normal, comparing our failure to other people, and then ultimately learning from our failure. But now we're going to jump into confidence. Xavier, what is confidence?
Confidence, man. Confidence is just that faith and ability and knowing that whatever you want to do, you're going to get it done. Um, that's the foundation of confidence for me. It's ultimately having a faith that it's going to happen. And that's something that is learned. That's something that's a process. You don't just get confidence like out of nowhere
Right.
without, practicing or preparation or those things that we talked about. So that's something that you have to build. You can't have faith on something that you don't know is going to happen because you didn't put in the work.
Mm-hmm.
So there's certain things that come before confidence, and it's a byproduct of really committing to excellence.
Yeah,
And that's for me, that's the foundation of confidence.
for sure. So really the underlying factor when it comes to that, from what I'm getting from you, is you really got to believe in what you're doing, and not just believe like it could happen, but believe like it's supposed to happen. You know that it's gonna happen if you continue with the hard work. So how do we develop confidence? So say we're, a 13U player and we're moving, from the small field to the big field. Now all of a sudden it's a longer throw, it's longer base pass. I got to hit the ball further to get it out of the infield. How do we, I mean, you got pitchers that are throwing hard at the 50-foot mark, but then they jump onto the 60-foot mound. All of a sudden they slow down. So how does that person develop confidence?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I just wrote down that I think one of the biggest things is like when we're making, a lot of times we're talking about making a jump from one place to the next, the minor leagues to the big leagues, high school to college, travel ball to high school, whatever it may be. I think it's important to not expect ourselves to automatically succeed. So what I mean by that is understanding that there's going to be a lot of hard work that we have to put in before we actually get on the field or before we actually, have to do our job. I think that comes along with learning, trying to soak up as much knowledge as possible. I feel like when you soak up as much knowledge, even as a normal businessman, you can't go do your job without learning about the business, about learning about your actual job, about learning your employees around you. So I think it's important for us as baseball players to learn everything that we can from the players that we are around, the teammates that we're around, the coaches that we're around, the mentors that we have, the instructors that we have. We can't jump in the cage with our hitting instructor and just me tell him how this is going to go, right?
Right.
We have to learn from the situation. So I think learning, watching, not expecting to be great all of a sudden. And confidence is also a byproduct of some of those things that we talked about, like preparation,
Mm-hmm.
discipline, doing the things that you don't necessarily want to do, but you
Yeah.
know that they'll provide in the end, and you know that you'll succeed in the end. That's a really hard one for athletes today, because and baseball players, we expect immediate results.
Yep.
So we talk about keeping the process, like like as much as we say, stay with the process, like, no, we want the results, like we
Right.
want them today, we want them now. But we have to understand that those things will come if we keep putting in the work, keep putting in what we need to do, and the results will become more immediate as long as we're sticking to that. Another thing I mentioned here is just the commitment factor, is having the ultimate reasoning behind not neglecting the little things that we can do.
Mm.
Just as a hitter, staying locked in before my at bat, maybe three or four pitchers, or me, three or four hitters before. If I'm in the outfield, understanding game situations, coming. I see so and so's on deck.
Mm-hmm.
I know he might be driving balls to the outfield. I need to get ready. Who am I throwing it to when it comes
Right.
in? Who's my cutoff man? So those are the things that I talk about. Is like, those are the little things. Commit to those. Those eventually help your preparation, and those help your confidence because you understand you were prepared already.
Yeah.
You were ready for every single situation. I remember being in the big leagues at one point and understanding that, okay, I haven't faced this guy before. I haven't faced this pitcher before. I think it was Jake Arrieta at the time when he was with the Cubs. I
Mm-hmm.
said, okay, let me do my research. Let me look on the video. I see what he's doing to right-handed hitters like me, certain situations. Okay, I get in the box during the game. There's confidence there because I've seen it already.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen what he's done. I haven't faced him, but I've seen what he's done to other hitters. So
Mm-hmm.
nothing's going to surprise me. Confidence is about not letting things surprise you. And I think that that's what I want to get across to a lot of these athletes today. Is like, hey, if something surprises you, you were not prepared. And we got to figure that out from the jump.
Yeah, I don't think as you progress in the game shouldn't surprise you, and really what the other person is bringing to the table shouldn't surprise you because you need to be prepared. Sometimes I feel sorry for, not sorry, but I feel like it's a tough spot for some of these kids that we post a lot on Instagram. A lot of the, especially pitchers, like a lot of these hitters are seeing what they've got. They're seeing it over and over again, and that's an advantage. That's something where you're increasing your confidence because you're seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
If I see you do something 10 times, it's going to be a lot better than me just going and trying to figure it out myself. Like if I see you do it a few times first, then it's easier for me to go ahead and do it. So if we're paying attention, if we're watching and learning, you know, it, the game is so intricate. There's a lot of different ways to get an out. There's a lot of different ways to move a runner over, to do these things. So it's not all
Yeah.
about getting up there and swinging the bat and just throwing as hard as you can. You got a lot going on. We're here on the X Factor with Xavier Scruggs. We're talking about dealing with failure and confidence. And so we just kicked off confidence and how to develop confidence, and learning that it's something you really got to pay attention. You really got to develop the understanding that it takes a lot of work, and you got to really, sit there and grind with it. It's not going to come overnight. So that leads me to my next question on this for you, X. And we talked about it with failure, but what about comparing our confidence to others? What about saying, okay, that guy walks up there and it seems like nothing phases him, and whether he gets a hit or he doesn't get a hit or whatever, like, how does that, like, should we compare ourselves to other people, how they're confident? I mean, I think that we should, pay attention to how confident they are and how they handle themselves in certain situations. But just because, he's confident up against, that certain pitcher doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to make me confident because he's confident, because that's a whole nother animal. But in terms of like paying attention to them and how they react to different things, I think that can help. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's important. Actually, literally, somebody just asked a question: how do I get more confidence over time? I am 11 playing up in 12U. What are some ways to deal with that? Like, for me, that's almost a good sense, because he's 11 playing up in 12U. Start looking at the 13U guys. See how they're doing in certain situations. Look at how their body language and how they present themselves. I think it's okay to compare yourself and see that a little bit. And another thing with that is self-talk. I think self-talk is hugely important. Like, the guys that you can visually see are a little more confident, they're usually having better self-talk than we are. We're being a little more negative. So it's okay to understand, okay, so-and-so looks more confident. What is he doing? One thing he's doing is he's talking to himself more positively. Whether or not he believes it, he's still going to talk to himself more positively about a certain situation. And he might be even vocal about it. Sometimes those guys are annoying, but I feel like if you're able to do some of those things in your head, like you just talked about, like visually seeing some of those results, like first it starts visually in our head. Like, we have to believe that within ourselves. So I wrote down, comparing yourself is okay, and comparing yourself to other players, because that's a mental thing. And I think you want to get on a mental level like that, especially when you're striving to keep going forward and forward as a player. So I think that that's okay. Just positive, understand there's positive talk and negative talk, and realize when you're talking to yourself negatively, oh man, I'm down 0-2. I don't want to strike out again. That's negative talk. Oh man, the ball, he might hit the ball to me. That's negative talk. Now I want the ball, right? That's what we want. We want to make the play.
Yeah.
So continuing to talk to yourself positively is huge. Visually seeing it. Another thing that is understanding is that there's always going to be new hurdles within your confidence.
Right.
Like, so for that 11 player, when he goes to 12, understanding that there's going to be a little toughness that comes along with it, but understanding that it's going to happen is being prepared for it.
Yep.
So I think that that's huge. So there's a lot of things that we can do to help build our confidence, and remembering that our confidence is being built, like by everything that we're doing. Every little single thing that we're doing is building our confidence. And for players that want to get noticed or want to be going to these showcases like the Swish Experience, or going to, these travel tournaments where there's a lot of scouts or coaches or watching you, university coaches watching,
Right.
keep your confidence level high no matter what. Your confidence is also that body language. That's huge. Even
100%.
if you're getting looked at all the time, so the body language needs to be on point. Coach, even if you don't have the confidence, coach can be like, man, that guy is calm. He just struck out. His body language is still good. So certain things that you can do, by not neglecting the little things.
Yeah. And when the coaches are not looking at one specific play, like obviously that'll catch their attention, like, and it's good to have that in your bag, but like, especially after failure, especially showing that there's a confidence that gives them something to look for. Like, they don't want a player that gets down on themselves every time they get out. That's going to be, I mean, we just talked about that, dealing with failure. You're going to fail more times than you don't, and you have to learn to accept that as the norm and not something that's a negative. So I got a couple curveballs here for you.
Oh
Dealing
man, hang them up there. Hang them up there.
All right. So how this one's an easy one. I guess it's not really a curveball. The next one's a curveball. How do you remain confident during failure? What are a couple of steps? What are a couple of keys for a player to remain confident during failure? Like, we talked about, the work ethic, we talked about sticking with the grind and developing the confidence, but then, okay, we're in the middle of it. We're in the thick of it. How do we keep that? We know how to develop it, but how do we keep that now that we realize we believe in ourselves, we believe in we're able to do this, and we're grinding out, trying to get to that point down the road. We're not trying to get it overnight. Nothing's coming, and we're still going 1 for 4 or 0 for 3 with a sack bunt, and coaches calling on us all the time to drop down a bunt, or we're getting pinch hit for late in the game. Like, how do we, we've developed that confidence to get us to that point, but then how do we remain confident during all that failure?
Yeah, I think you have to test yourself. I think you have to. I think that's where adjustments comes in huge. Am I able to make adjustments when I need to? I've been struggling a little bit, understanding that I've been keeping the process, but maybe I need to make an adjustment. Maybe I need to make a change. And that's where we can build more confidence. Like if I'm able to make an adjustment during a short time, or during a short period, and make myself not go through that same slump I've been going through for the past couple of weeks, like that's another way to build confidence. If I can make changes within my swing, make changes within my fielding, pitching, whatever it may be, and then find a new way to win, I think that builds confidence as well. And then also remembering that it's easy for us to scale it so large, but our wins have to come a little bit smaller. We have to build confidence off of those little wins, whether that be, getting that first strike as a pitcher, understanding that, man, I've been failing a lot, but let me focus on the smaller things. I think when we fail a lot of times and really dig ourselves in the slump, we're like looking at the whole picture, like, oh man, I'm 1 for my last 14. My average is going to be, down to 200, and it's going to be so hard for me to build it back up from there. Like we start thinking about things on a huge scale, right? Yeah. And we've all gone through it. So it's easier for me to kind of pass it down to a lot of these athletes to understand, like, as soon as you can scale it down small, that's how you keep building those wins and that confidence, because everybody goes through slumps. Everybody goes through failure. So if we're able to, get the small wins, I think that's a good way to produce during that time.
If I just can get 7 hits over the next 5 games, my average is going to bump up 60 points. We've all been there before.
Yeah,
don't tell me you've been there before.
Absolutely. And my dad used to do it to me too. Like I'd be in college. Like, he'd be like, if you go 12 for your next 23, I'm like, yeah, that sounds easy, but like when I'm actually in the box, that's a totally different.
So I would work backwards. I would start the season off based on my preparation over the off season, based on how I felt in the spring, based on how I felt like in the preseason workouts, and said, okay, and based off of last year's performance and how I felt, you got to take a lot of factors into account, but I would set off my season goals all the way through as if I was playing, not all the games, but as many games as I felt like I would be playing, and say, okay, I'm probably going to be batting here in the lineup. So that means, our offense is this good. So at that point, I'll probably be getting 3 to 4 at bats per game. So I'd math it all out and say, okay, this is how many at bats I plan to have. This is how many walks I plan to have on that, strikeouts, I would take my whole stat line. I'm not even kidding. I would take my whole stat line and write it all the way across. So that way I could check on myself. I could check on myself as I was going and say, okay, I'm really, really hot. I don't want to get out of here and say, okay, I'm going to bat this, when I know that over a long season, this is something I saw was good. So I could keep my head on a level plane there. And when I was down, I could say, okay, well, what can I do to get back up a little bit? So I'd take away that season stat line and say, okay, I need to go, let's break it down over the next series. Okay. We've got 4 games coming up. I'm going to start off 4 games, right? I'm going to start off 4 games. I'll look at the pitchers and say, okay, this is what they got. So I'll make a plan of attack and say, okay, I feel confident going this in this game, this in this game, this in this game. And then at the end of that series, I can see where I was at, because not necessarily trying to hold myself. I wouldn't take that so serious to where I was pissed off if I didn't get the hit. I looked at it in terms of, I wanted to make sure, because I'm hitting on the point where we just talked about maintaining. How do we remain confident during failure, right? So This is my point here, is that would take me back to remembering all the hard work that I put in, right? I've worked so hard in the off season, so hard in the spring. I worked hard to get where I'm at. I'm not just going to go out there and whatever happens, happens. No, I got to have a plan so I can stay focused, because if I don't stay focused, then I might go this way for a minute and have to start all over again because I realize that's the wrong way to go. So I don't use it to say, okay, crap, I didn't go 7 for 18 this 4-game series. I suck. I'll take it and say, okay, I went 3 for 19 and I struck
Mhm.
out a lot. Okay, what am I going to work on when I get back home? I'm going to work on the tee. I'm going to get back to the beginning and say, okay, how do I remain confident during this failure? I know that I can hit the ball off the tee. I know what it feels like to hit the ball well off the tee. If I don't feel well off the tee, that's the easiest thing that you can do. If you don't feel well off the tee, something's wrong, right?
Right,
So I go
right.
back to the beginning. So that's my opinion on remaining confident during failure, is that you go back to the fundamentals and remember that you can do it. Do those
Yeah.
fun. Do the soft toss. Do the tee work. Do tennis ball against the wall. Get some rollies with not a lot of speed on the ground ball, and go back to the beginning and get confident with your mechanics and say, okay, I can do this. I'm confident. Now I'm going to go back out there. Just because I fail by not getting the hits I want doesn't mean that I'm not a good player. And that's how I maintain my confidence through that failure. So
I
anyway,
think that
here.
that's huge. No, that's right. I was gonna say, like, I used to go back and, it's almost the little tedious things that we're good at that we like forget to go back and check those first. So I think that that's a really good point. And another thing, all major league players will tell you, you got to have a dig me video. You got to have the video of you just going 30 for 30, homers left and right, doubles. That's how you remind yourself how good you are. That's how you keep your confidence. You go look at those videos before those games, where you maybe been struggling, and you remind yourself, man, I'm bad. I'm legit. Like, I'm a beast. So those are the things that I think another thing that helps build that confidence.
So we're allowed to go back and watch videos of ourselves doing well.
Oh man, all
Okay,
the
good.
time, and
I thought it was just me. I thought it was just me.
that's that's what you got to do. It's important because sometimes all of us go through those slumps. We think that we suck, but then you go back and you see yourself killing it. You remind yourself what that feeling was like. You
That's
visually
it.
see it, right?
That's it. That's it, man. All right. So we're here with Xavier Scruggs. This is the X Factor right here on the Prospect Dugout Network. I am your
Yeah, yeah.
host, Joel Hartman. Uh, thanks. We'll get some Instagram comments. Thanks. I need a little boost in confidence because I've been in a slump. That's awesome. Definitely helps gain back the confidence. Man, loving these comments. You guys are awesome. All right. You ready for this curveball, Xavier?
What you got now? What do we got?
How we just talked about. Okay, we our first topic was dealing with failure, how to accept failure as normal, comparing our failure to others, and learning from our failure. Now we're talking about confidence, right? We talked about how to develop confidence. We talked about comparing our confidence and feeding off of other people. And we just talked about remaining confident during failure. So here's the curveball. Xavier, how do we remain confident during success?
Hmm, that's
Because what
that's
happens? What happens? You go 3 for 4, and then all of a sudden you go 4 for 4. Then all of a sudden you're 2 for 5, and you're 3 for 4 again. All of a sudden you're batting 667. You're like, oh, I don't need to go work on the tee. I don't need to get to bed early. I don't need to do this. How do you remain confident during that success?
I don't need to get to bed early. Hey, that's a good point, man, because sometimes when you're high on your horse, you think that you can kind of level off on the certain things that you've been doing well. You can stay out a little bit later, you can play video games a little bit longer. Um, but I think all great athletes will tell you, if you don't stick with that same process that you've had, you're going to find yourself just as high as you are, just as low as you can go. Um, I think it's important mentally to first remind ourselves of that process, what got us there. So don't neglect doing those same things that got you there. And then remember that where you are right now is not where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
You can always get better in some sense of the word, some sense of your game. So remembering to always push yourself, like we talked about, there's no level of perfection. But knowing that if I'm, whatever it may be, 22 for 33, knowing that at some point the average is going to come down, but how else can I get myself better prepared for the rest of the season or for where I'm going to be next year? a lot of times I get high school athletes that kind of compare themselves. Man, I'm killing it this season, but where are you going to be at next year if you're in college? What are
Mhm.
you comparing yourself to? So always remembering that there's an opportunity to get better. Remembering that, as baseball, we want to kind of always be here. We don't want to be up, down, up, down, up, down. And so the biggest thing with that is continuing to stay with that process that, that those numbers are telling you that you're doing something right within the process, not necessarily the outcome, all the time.
Right.
So
Right.
stick with what you're doing with the process, find ways to get better, and keep your confidence level high. But don't remember, like you said, that doesn't mean you start shutting off on other things. You still gotta keep doing those little things that got you to that position.
Yeah, I think the ultimate thing everybody goes back to during a slump is what? Fundamentals, right? So if you're on a hot streak and you're forgetting fundamentals, I mean, it's inevitable. Like I know I can't explain the feeling, and I'm sure you know the feeling as well. I just can't explain it. You know when you're in that high ride of a moment where you're just seeing the ball well, you're doing it well. You know that feeling when you're on the taper down off of it. You can feel that crap. You know what?
Yeah.
Something I messed something up. It's not clicking anymore. Something is just a little off. And then if you don't catch it, you're about to drop down real quick. You're about to hit rock bottom, right? So I think having that confidence, you don't want it to go from confidence to cockiness. You don't want it to go from confidence to arrogance in the sense of
Right.
I don't need to do that, or I'm
Yeah.
not going to show up on time today because hey, what's he going to do? Bench me? I just went 4 for 5 3 games in a row. What's he going to do? I
Right.
think
Right.
that takes you to a point where you're no longer a team player. And then another thing, like if you having some success is so out of the ordinary that you're going to change your whole routine based on that, like are you like what are you even doing playing? Like how are you going to play at a
Right.
high
Right.
how are you going to play at a high level if you're not even going to have an expectation to, like if that's really really good for you, like you're going to have stretches where you're going to get 3 4 hits, and then you're going to have stretches where you get 0 hits. But it's if you can stay consistent and not have so many lows, maybe have more highs. But if you don't have a lot of highs, as long as we don't have a lot of those lows and we stay consistent, that's where it's going to help us. So I think the big key is the confidence of doing what we're doing. If I guess in my interpretation, it's easy to be confident when you're having the success. You could walk out there if your arm's feeling great, you do long toss and you're like, I'm good, man. Like there's just certain feelings of different intricacies of the game. Like when you go out there and run, you're like, oh, I'm about to steal 4 bags today, just because something's clicking, right? And so I think
Right. Right.
I think that's where you get when you're on that successful high. You feel like you can do a lot of things, and I think that's where you get to that downfall towards that slump, is that you start doing things you don't normally do. Maybe you squared up a couple of balls good in the games. You're like, ooh, I'm going to start trying to put the ball out in BP now. And then you're changing those things that even got you to that point, which it's the
Right.
same thing when you think of it in a slump. Like you're not going to change everything right away when you're in a slump. You're going to go back to the beginning and do what comes natural. If you're in a hot streak and then all of a sudden you want to change and try to hit home runs at BP, you're not a home run hitter. You're changing everything, and you're a couple games away from not seeing the ball well anymore, because that timing mechanism and that clearance in your mind, you're not doing that anymore. Like it's not about, how good your mechanics are. It's not about how good, you look as a baseball player. It's all about timing. It's all about that rhythm of, you could walk up to the plate and know you're going to get a hit. I mean, we talked about this last week. There's times where you walk up to the box and then literally you're standing at second and you don't know how you got there, because it's just you got lost in the moment and you did it. So I think, regardless of whether you're in a slump, regardless of whether you're dealing with failure or dealing with success, I think going back to the beginning and staying focused on those fundamentals is really what's going to keep you confident during that.
Yeah, I think that that's a great point. And just a couple of things that I
Yep.
wrote down too is, I tell these players that I talk to a lot of the time is just find a way to get better every day. I don't care if you're killing it or you're slumping, whatever it may be, find a way to get
Mhm.
better every day. That'll continue to build your confidence. And then kind of coming full circle with failure. A lot of times, even when you're, feeling super confident and you start, on that little downslide that you just talked about,
Yeah.
knowing that maybe you failed a couple of times, or you didn't hit well, or something didn't go your way. Maybe it wasn't necessarily mechanical. Maybe it wasn't necessarily mental. Sometimes we don't know what it is. Sometimes the pitcher had a good day. So don't let those things all of a sudden create that downslide. Just keep doing what you were doing.
Yeah. Dude, you just brought up a point there too. It just brought two thoughts to my head. Um, you might have an off day or whatever, so you might try to do something too much. You might try too hard to do this or try too hard to do that. And then the same thing, if the pitcher's having a good day, like dude could just be lighting it up. And I think this is where you got to have, I can't think of the term right now. Oh yeah, obviously that that's funny. You got to have a short memory. I can't think of the term right. Oh my gosh. You got to have a short memory, because if that pitcher is doing well, you're going to face another pitcher tomorrow. And if you take everything out, if what you take out of that at bat is that, crap, I did something wrong, then you just screwed yourself up for the next game. You just screwed yourself up for the next pitcher, because you're not acknowledging or understanding where he's at, his skill level. If you're not paying attention, and you don't realize that you weren't the only one that struck out 3 times. Everybody on your team struck out 3 times. So the pitcher was dirty. Like, you need to relax and say, okay, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just going to forget about the game, and I'm going to move to the next game, and I'm just going to wipe that 0 for 3 out. It's still going to be in the stat line, but I'm just not going to think about it. I'm going to start tomorrow with the same approach, the same confidence that I had.
That's the key right there. Keep that same confidence, same approach. No matter highs or lows, keeping that same approach, and understanding how to make little adjustments, especially like baseball players, we play a lot of games. So understanding that it's hard to make big adjustments during those stretch of games.
Yeah.
So use your time wisely. And I think that, I think a lot of, even in the comments, like a lot of people are getting, giving some good feedback. And I feel like they understand that, the mentality is the biggest part of it. Like, we're not even necessarily talking about physical things. Like, we're
Right.
talking mental, we're talking the X factor. And these are separating factors. These are separating things that get you noticed, that get you a little bit further along in your journey.
That's it. So today was a great episode here on the X Factor with Xavier Scruggs, talking about dealing with failure and confidence. We talked about how to accept failure as a norm when it comes to the game of baseball, not something out of the ordinary. So that way it doesn't really send us into whirlwinds. We talked about comparing our failure to others, and understanding that each player is different, and that just because your teammate benches 225 doesn't mean that you have to. And then we also talked about how to learn from failure, how to, journal and write things down, and keep notes on what's going on, so you can actually improve yourself as you go. Switching on to confidence, we talked about developing confidence, that it's something that, each person has the opportunity to build and develop for themselves. But then not only developing that, we talked about comparing it to others and how to use other people's confidence and their swag and their mental strength to reinforce what you've got, and help you learn from that. And then finally, we talked about how to remain confident during both failure and success. You got to stay even keeled. You got to stay with the right mindset, because you can't get too high. You can't get too low, because, the game of baseball is all about failure, right? It's all about failure. So if you get too worked up on the 3 for 4 and too worked up on the 0 for 3, you're going to have a long season, especially when you're playing, a bunch of games in the sun. And I mean, it could be very, very long. So thank you guys. Thank you guys for joining us here on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram Live. My man, Xavier Scruggs, you can find out more about him at xoathletes.com. You can find him on Instagram, at Extraordinary Athletes, and then also at Xavier.Scruggs, because somebody took at Xavier Scruggs. I don't know how that happened, but anyway, X, why don't you just kind of wrap us up with about 30 seconds, whatever you want to say, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah. Just want to appreciate everybody for joining today. I think everybody that's on here, the parents on here, kids that are on here, you guys are taking the right steps. following everything Prospect Dugout is doing. Keep watching their content, because I think that this is something that's going to help you really excel your game. A lot of cool opportunities coming, showcases, camps, all that stuff, man. So keep it locked right here. Prospect Dugout, Extraordinary Athletes, we're coming.
That's it. I just noticed all the laughs in the IG comments when I said I couldn't remember that term. Having short memory. Just tons of smiles over here. That's awesome. That's awesome. So,
Love it.
Xavier, man, thanks again for joining me today. It's a blast. We'll see you again next week, 1 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
See you
buddy. All
again.
right. See you
Appreciate
guys.